When I first saw this came out, I completely dismissed it, didn't even consider watching it. Nothing about the title or the poster spoke to me on pretty much any level. However, then I started to hear good things about it from several different places. So I gave it another look, and while it still didn't look very compelling to me, I couldn't just ignore all the positive whispers I'd been hearing about it. So I put it on my list of potential movies to watch, and a few days later I had an urge to give it a shot. And you know what? I'm very glad I did, because this turned out to be a delightful little movie. And it's a bit of a post-apocalyptic movie where all sorts of animals and insects have mutated into what pretty much amounts to monsters, and very few humans remain alive. And without getting into too much detail, we basically follow this young man, played by Dylan O'Brien, who decides to take his chances and brave the wild in order to potentially find his girlfriend. And this turns into a pretty fun and oftentimes really funny adventure movie. One with a lead character that is just plain likable and who's played by a really charismatic guy too. So you're basically just inclined to like this movie from almost the get-go. And one of the things that makes him so likable too is that he's far from flawless. In fact, he's deeply flawed, but the important thing here is that he's not helpless. He starts off borderline helpless, but as the movie progresses he learns a thing or two and consistently improves. So you get to see some real growth, and that just helps sell you on the character. Speaking of characters, there's this little girl at one point, and she's adorable. She's also one of the standouts in a movie that is just really good all around. And fun fact, she's played by the same girl who played young Gamora in Infinity War. A role where she didn't exactly have a whole lot to do, but in this, she's allowed to show her chops. And she's great, her comedic delivery is spot on, and yeah, I really liked her in this. Another highlight for me that came as a huge surprise was the dog. Yeah, the dog. There's a dog in this, and it's probably the best performance by a dog in a movie I've ever seen. I can't imagine they could have done a better job casting or training it than this. It was very impressive. Which I guess brings me to the more technical side of things, and I would say they did a good job with pretty much everything here. And this has a lot of CGI, and it's definitely not the best CGI I've ever seen. In fact, I would almost call it subpar, except that it's kinda stylized to the point that it works pretty well. They didn't try to make it too realistic, instead they went with a borderline cartoony feel instead. And when it comes to the direction and the editing, well, the direction didn't really draw attention to itself. But I will say that the editing was sharp without being flashy, and it just made the pacing of the movie feel really tight. Which is another reason the movie was so enjoyable. It just keeps moving at a very steady pace. It doesn't really leave room for any bloat, and pretty much everything that happens serves a purpose. And kudos to the writers too, because I loved how many little important details there were in this. They really put some love and care into crafting the script, because nothing felt pointless. If some little thing was set up in some part of the movie, and there were a lot of those things, then you could count on that setup paying off later in one way or another. And that's just a sign of great writing right there, and I very much appreciated it. But if I had to find something negative to say about this thing as a whole, I guess it would be that the actual plot itself was pretty bare bones. But it worked. And if that's the biggest issue I had with the movie, it's doing alright. And yeah, this movie was just a joy to watch, and I loved the fact that it wasn't the least bit cynical either. That's kind of a rare trait these days, and especially when it comes to post-apocalyptic movies, it's almost unheard of. So to summarize, I would say that you should probably give this a shot. Especially if you're looking for something fairly light-hearted, fun and funny to watch. Although I will say that this one's not without a decent amount of heart too. It works on many levels. But anyway, I at least thoroughly enjoyed it, and I'm pretty happy I didn't skip this one. And because of that, I'm gonna have to give this one a solid 8. Boop. But would I recommend it? Yeah, definitely give this one a shot, or don't. After all, I'm not your dad. But hey, what are your thoughts on this? Have you seen it? Did you like it? Let me know. And if you enjoyed the video, maybe give it a thumbs up or sub to the channel, because that would be fantastic.